Welcome to the Transforming Healthcare Coaching Podcast, where we bring you guidance and coaching perspectives so that you can level up in your life and work. Our episode today is about debunking myths about positive psychology. And unfortunately, positive psychology has gotten a bad rap for no reason. It's no better than Dr. Kiki Ramsey, founder and CEO of Positive Psychology and Diversity Institute, and executive coach for leaders across the world. We are so excited to have you on today. If you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Super excited. So, I am a positive psychologist and executive coach, and I am the founder of Positive Psychology Coaching and Diversity Institute, aka PCADDY, because the name is super long. And so, what I do as a positive psychologist and executive coach is I really study happiness, teach people how to create own happiness. And I use that using a lot of positive psychology methods and tools, as well as some diversity, equity, and inclusion methods as well. So I coach and teach every single day as it pertains to us learning how to create our own happiness so that we can transform our lives and our careers.
I love that. And so I think that's maybe what drew me towards you was the fact that you teach coaching as well and you teach positive psychology. And so tell us a little bit about your career journey to positive psychology, executive coach, and motivational speaker.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was initially a social worker. So I went to school and got my MSW, go social workers, some of the hardest working people out there. Right. And so I became a social worker because I loved helping people. I started off helping my mom who had a drug addiction back in the day. And I just fell in love with just helping women overcome their challenges. And so I ultimately went to school to get my master's in social work. And as I was doing that, I realized that the work is beautiful. The work is noble. The work is just all these things, but the work is also hard. The work is also stressful. And it was a lot of kind of doom and gloom when it came to the work that I was doing. And so I knew that there was this bigger calling of my life just to pour into the lives of women. So I actually ultimately quit my job as a social worker to become a speaker. And I went around to conferences and different organizations, really showing people how to just transform their lives and pouring that motivation into us because a lot of times we don't see our own greatness. And as I was doing that, a lot of women in my audiences started coming up to me asking me if I could help them on a personal basis. And I was like, sure. I didn't actually know what it was called, but I was like, we can have some conversations. And then ultimately, I realized that thing was called coaching, which is a relationship between two people where the coach assists another person in reaching their goals. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I essentially already do. And then as I was researching coaching, in coaching schools, I just learned about this thing called positive psychology. And when I learned about positive psychology, it literally it blew my mind. And so, positive psychology is the study of what goes right with you versus only thinking about what's wrong, which we normally do. Like in society, we normally lean on the negative versus the positive. And so, positive psychology says, why don't we also lean on the positive just as much as we lean on the negatives, right? We're not trying to get rid of the negatives, right? But why don't we do both? And so when I learned about that, put those two things together, decided to go to coach training school that also had a positive psychology component, and the rest is history.
That is so amazing. It's so wonderful. It just is a natural transition as a social worker into helping people and into helping people in a way that is anabolic, energizing, and developmentally what we all are looking for. Just really haven't been exposed to it. And so I think that's part of the reason why there's so many misconceptions about positive psychology. People start to get talk about toxic positivity, and that's not at all what positive psychology is. Completely not even the right thing. So we're going to dispel that myth right now. I'm curious, what are the most common misconceptions that you have whenever you just tell people like what it is that you teach as a professor and what you do to help people as an executive coach and you explain to them what positive psychology is, they almost always give you something a little not quite right. What are
Yeah.
your most common misconceptions that you have to dispel?
I think a lot of people think that with positive psychology, you just always have to be positive. And first of all, people that I'm amazed at how many people don't know and never have heard of positive psychology before, right? There's a lot of people who've never heard of it. People know what psychology is, but they've never heard of positive psychology. So when I'm in a room, I ask people to raise their hands, how many people who've heard of positive psychology, and couple of hands, only a couple of hands. I am so surprised. Like
No,
after I've been in this field for so long, only a couple of hands are raised every time I ask that question.
that's amazing.
So a lot of people, when I say I'm a positive psychologist, they're like, "Oh, bless your heart, you just so positive."
That's
So
ridiculous.
I said, "What do you think that means?" They're like, "We just think you're just so positive," that kind of thing. And I'm like, I can, but that positive psychology is a real thing. And then, of course, I teach positive psychology coaching as a professor at Life University in Atlanta, Georgia. And most people don't even think that's a real university. They're like, oh, yeah, I've been in Life University too, because I done had some hard times and I done overcame a lot of things in my life.
That's really funny.
My whole life is just a fake, right? You're like,
Right.
no, positive psychologist who teaches at Life University. It's just, it doesn't make sense to most people. But I think that first misconception is that people think that positive psychology and is just us always being positive, right?
Right.
And that's where that term toxic positivity comes from. People think that there are people who are just overly positive about every single thing, and that positive psychology is saying that you only have to be positive and you can't have an array of emotions. And that's just not true. That's not what positive psychology is saying at all. It's saying that, hey, most of us only talk about the negatives. That's the truth. We don't really, our society is really hell bent on fixing problems. That's just what it is. Like when
Right.
you go to a coach or when you get help, it's just to fix a problem. But what positive psychology is saying is you probably come to that situation with some good things already. Why don't we tap into those things that you already do good, highlight them while we're still fixing the problem? And I think that's one of the biggest things that I have to deal with when it comes to people understanding about positive psychology is that it's not always just we're talking about the positive aspects.
And so I often describe coaching as the real life implementation of positive psychology as originally described by Martin Seligman and his original PERMA method. And so the way we achieve that for our clients is really variable depending on what model that you use for your coaching practice. And it always has as goal maximizing the human potential for individual client. And so how does positive psychology coaching take that science to practice?
Yeah, for sure. I love positive psychology and coaching. And then, of course, I love PERMA. Like most people may know about PERMA's positive emotions, relationships. What is it? Meaning and purpose. Yep. Accomplishments. I think I've got maybe one.
Engagement, I guess, really just
Yeah,
mean engaged with activities. Yep, that's the only other one.
I
Yeah.
forgot one. But the way we take positive psychology and enter it in to coaching is because most coaching, and I do know this to be true for most coaching, regardless of what school that you went to for coaching, believe that our clients come to our sessions whole, right? Like understanding that you bring the knowledge with you that you need to overcome your problems and challenges. We as the coaches are not an expert in you. You are an expert in you, right?
Right.
Positive psychology comes into play is that I know for some of my clients, they may come in not recognizing their strengths. They may come in to a coaching session very much operate from a deficit model, meaning they don't think that they are capable as they are. They are very down on themselves. They haven't been taking care of themselves. And so I think as my job as a positive psychologist and executive coach is to point those out and to help them begin to notice their strengths so that they can walk from a place of strength in our coaching session and understand that they have what it takes to overcome their challenge. And it's just my job as a coach to bring that to light and to help them formulate the steps that they need in order to get to the goal of where they want to be. And I think that is true in so many cases. Not every coach uses a strengths based method, meaning like I use an assessment to help my clients actually understand their strengths. And we focus on those throughout our coaching sessions. And I'll say, hey, Lillian, I know that you have a strength of a love of learning. How can we use that in this situation with your employee who you're not having great communication with? Right. And so I help them tap into that learning because they already love to learn. Why not figure out how to learn more about that employee, what makes them tick, what makes them smile, what makes them happy, so that it can start to strengthen your relationship.
I love that. That's such a great and easy demonstration for how a positive psychology coach and the coaches in your program and in your school use really explicitly what each client actually brings to the table. And it's very similar to what we do with our energy leadership coaching is that very first assessment is just trying to understand where do we even find ourselves as we begin this coaching relationship for 3, 6, 1 year,
Yeah,
however that journey needs to be for development so that we can leverage those strengths in general.
absolutely.
Yeah. And it's so amazing to me that I think a lot of times people come to the situation knowing some strengths and also actually just being unaware of other strengths.
Oh, yeah. That's amazing. When we give our assessment, I'll always ask our clients, were these strengths were they a surprise? And some of them will, they're like, yeah, I was actually surprised that this one was not as high as another strength. And I'm like, that's interesting. And some of them don't recognize that they have such strengths. And I'm always appalled at that because we operate from these every single day, but we don't notice them. And I'll tell my clients all the times, they'll say, oh, that's just easy. That's just who I am. No, that's a strength. And so what we do is we downplay our strengths because we think that everybody has them and they don't. Like you and I both, we operate differently, but we both have some strengths and we're still both coaches, but we still operate differently from a place of strength. And so I
Right.
think that sometimes as people, especially my clients, they'll downplay what they bring to the table, which ultimately then can cause a lack of self-esteem, a lack of motivation to get done what they ultimately want to get done in terms of their goals.
And I think the other interesting thing with all of that is how do we make sure we can maintain our strengths and not let it
Mm,
become an Achilles heel and also find other new things that we can strengthen. So having that duality mindset where life is really meant to be lived. And so be really glad that you have a great strength. Keep it, keep doing it, maintain it. And also, maybe you can add on and leverage on a new strength for yourself and be curious about what you might think as a client. Oh, I think I need to work on, I don't know, fill in the blank, becoming more detail oriented. Let's try that. And then see where that takes people places.
I love that. It's strength challenging. Meaning,
Mm,
because in my organization, we use the VIA, character
yes.
strengths assessment. I like it because I believe that a lot of times we focus a lot on like our skill strengths, which a lot of times we know what those are, but our character strengths are the things that we just don't always know and we don't feel like we're operating in. And so, for instance, my top character strength is zest. I always tell people, honey, Imma show up zesty regardless regardless of anything. So I use that strength. It doesn't take me anything to strengthen zest. It's part of who I am. But I always like to tease humility and humble is like my bottom strength. And it's like, I'm not humble. Oh Lord. Uh, it's so I was like, "Babe, I need to work on my humbleness a little bit," that kind of thing. But I find it funny because all of these character strengths are strengths, but humble for me shows up down here. And I just think for me, my confidence outweighs that. And
Right.
so it's not that I'm like, oh my God, I'm like the
Right.
best. I do
Right.
sometimes to make sure that I'm motivated. But it's not like I'm doing that in people's face, like I'm the best there ever was, and blah, blah, blah. I'm just more confident about my ability and how I show up. And so that strength may not rise to the top all the time, but being able to know that and saying, okay, today I'm going to work on XYZ strength, I think is a beautiful thing because they're all still strengths for us.
And whether you call them strengths, and I think in our group, we call them our values, like at the
Mm,
beginning, especially as you were saying the character strengths, because I think that's when a lot of times people in healthcare also feel at dissonance because they're told there is a different way you have to show up in the workplace. I think that dissonance can, and actually, obviously, for DEI and cultural aspects too, when we're a minority culture or minority gender within a particular group, it can be very stressful because you're not sure how are you allowed to be a little bit outside the box? Are you allowed to be zesty? Who knows? And so I guess I'm curious if you had to give advice related to that, what would you, as a positive psychology coach, what would you say about that exact context I mentioned?
I love it. And I do, being a diversity expert as well, and really thinking and talking about belonging, I want people to be able to show up in organizations being their complete selves. I think that's when you get the best work out of us. And I think that's when we can show up our best and give our best to a job. I don't know about you, but I've never been able to show up to a job and give my very best when I feel like I'm hiding
Mhm.
or I can't be who I am. And so I will tell people that number one, you got to feel safe, right? Because not every organization has psychological safety. And that's an external thing outside of just this conversation that we're talking about. So
Right.
at the end of the day, you got to be able to know that you're safe in a space, that there are no repercussions for you showing up who you are. But I would potentially be having some conversations if I felt like I couldn't show up how I wanted to. I would try to find a safe space or safe person that I could have some conversations with within the organization, preferably somebody who is higher up, who can champion some change, right? Maybe you have an ally in the org or a DNI champion within the organization that you can have these conversations with so that you can say, hey, I don't feel like I can show up my full self. And here's why. And I'm wondering if there's anything that we can do about it. But when it comes to character strengths, and I still operate out of that place, still operate as authentically as possible. And if that's not possible, I always tell people that we have options, right? I know that's easier said than done because when it comes to happiness, 10% of our happiness is based on our everyday circumstances, and circumstances can change. It might take time for circumstances to change, but they can change, and we have control over that in our own lives. And so I always tell people if you're not happy where you are in your job and you feel like you can't show up who you are, I want you to know that there are options out there available for you, but you would have to be brave enough to even begin to explore those options for yourself, to even think that you could do something different.
Exactly. And it's really interesting. I do think our gut is we should listen to if there's a gut feeling that it's not safe, then just be okay with baby tests of change rather than thinking that you have to go full on like armor, brave, charge through, change the culture, do the everything. We're going to make everything better here. It's not going to be only on one person's back. And it's just these small wins or small vulnerabilities. That's how culture is changed and beginning the dialogue. And I think what's probably most helpful for all of us is to recognize that we everyone has a role in making that belonging culture. And I think nobody ever wants to be a leader that doesn't allow people to feel belonging, right? Nobody actually woke up, including the person who you think your boss. I know people are listening to this right now and saying, I think my boss actually thinks that, but I don't think so. I think most people in leadership really are just very stressed out running their own race. They often forget about how they make other people feel and and then just to notice and mention that for me to be my full best potential with you in this team and this organization, I like to be able to share some things. Is that okay? And then it just opens the door that I think leaders who are just busy again, running all the metrics, doing all the things to have an opportunity to be like, oh, yes, we can actually, yeah, I mean, love to hear more about just your lived experience and also why some of these company policies are a mess. And because they just weren't aware.
Oh my gosh. It's so interesting because there's you're saying in coaching, as you will know, coach the person and not the problem. Right. And I think that also goes for us and leaders in organizations. I think what you said is so very true. As leaders in organizations, we're so very busy doing the job, right? Doing the job. But the job that you're doing has a lot of other people involved in the job. And most of the times, as leaders, what I see in organizations is that they don't focus on the people who are also helping them do the job. And when you don't focus on the people, then it's hard to build true connections, first of all. And then it's also hard to build that psychological safety within organizations. And so I think that a lot of times we have to take a step back and understand that the business is people, like the company of people. The only way you get to the product, whatever the service is through people. And if you discount and you don't look at the people who are on your team or know what their strengths are, what makes them tick or what makes them feel seen, then people leave. And you also heard this saying before: people stay at jobs because of people, and
Right.
people leave jobs because of people.
Right.
Like we all will stay or go because of
Mhm.
those who you're working with or we're working for. And so I think that relationship is so important in terms of just understanding who are you working with, who are you working for. And if you can't be personable with the people who work for you or work around you, then nobody else is going to feel safe to do that either. Yeah.
Those are all such amazing pearls and mic drops, like, right there in the last 5 minutes that you just shared, because it is so true, and I also do think it is all of our responsibility to try a little bit, try to see whether or not we can get this relationship to be jump started before we just turn in the towel and say, "You know what? It's time to do the harder work to go somewhere else," because the grass isn't always greener. You're probably gonna be doing the same work everywhere else because
Yeah.
there's just turnover.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I guess I wanna switch gears a little bit. Our healthcare population is a very skeptical group, I feel like sometimes. I feel like they see, they feel, and they hear vicarious trauma all the time in their daily practice of work, whether you're outpatient, inpatient, no matter what sector that you're in our healthcare industry, it's hard. And so what pearls of perspective can we give healthcare clinicians today from the science of positive psychology? What would be things you'd want to tell healthcare professionals today?
Absolutely. It is hard. And I used to be a medical social worker as well. And so I work healthcare and you see so much more than the average person would ever see in their entire lifetime as well. And so I think that one of the things I would tell healthcare workers, especially from a positive psychology standpoint, is to make sure that you are taking care of yourself, meaning that whole self care. And I know you're big on that as well within your coaching practice. That self-care is so important. And I think a lot of times too, self-care in itself gets this bad rap and then people are like, oh, all you gotta do is go get a massage and get your hair done and get your toes done. That's not even what I'm necessarily talking about. Although, honey, I do love a good spa day, right?
Right.
However, what I'm saying is when I think about taking care of ourselves mentally and physically, right? Because
Mhm.
your mental we are going so fast, especially in healthcare, like you're moving like consistently. If you don't ever take a moment out to stop
Mhm.
and just breathe, I know that then if you don't ever, that starts to build anxiety. And I know that happens to a lot of my clients and even myself when I'm like moving so fast, I'm like, I got a thousand things to do. But guess what? You're not going to get all those things done in this hour or in these next 15 minutes. So you need to slow down. So I believe practicing mindfulness is very important. And in mindfulness, practicing mindfulness can look like taking 5 minutes out to just breathe and not nothing, to just step back and just be like, I need a beat. I need a second to collect my thoughts. I think that is so important. And mindfulness is just really being aware of everything that's going on around you, being present in the moment and not being judgmental about it. Because, yeah, it can probably suck, of course, but at the end of the day, what is that going to help you? That's not going to help you. And so I think being mindful. And then I also think that a lot of healthcare workers do not get enough sleep. And I understand why, because it's a high stakes positions a lot of times. But if you can focus on getting more sleep, it will absolutely change your lives. And I don't think this is something that they, as healthcare professionals, they don't know. I think it's just harder to practice it versus not knowing, but it will change your life. It literally changes everything about how you feel, your mood, everything changes when you actually get enough sleep. And so those are two things. And that's part of self to me, right? Which is getting enough sleep and then focusing on your mental. It are two of the most important things when it comes to self care for healthcare professionals and anybody else who may be listening.
So true. So true. Those are such excellent pearls of wisdom. And so I guess as we come to a close, I'm wondering, do you have any last perspectives, tips, or wisdom? And how can people work with you? I know you have some new things coming down the pike for Dr. Kiki Ramsey International. So I'm curious to hear about like, what are you up to?
Awesome. Yeah, no, for sure. So I think the last perspective, I would just say at the end of the day, when it comes to positive psychology and just being happy, understand that you have meaning and purpose, right? Like your life means something. You matter in this world today. And so if nobody's ever told you that, I just want you to hear it from me that you matter. You are here for a reason and you bring such beautiful gifts to the world, and so I just want you to know that your life has meaning and purpose. And it is your job, your duty to share your gifts with the world because somebody out there is waiting on you to be able to share your gifts with them. And so that's one of the last things I wanted to say. And then I also wanted to just say for anyone who is looking for to become a coach, I believe that there's so many people out there with such amazing skills, especially if you're in the helping profession, therapist, teacher, anyone in the nonprofit sector, just anybody who has that foundation. I think that you make an amazing coach. And with my company, PCADdy, we are launching our own coach training program. It's called the Positively Diverse Coach Certification Program. And that'll start at the beginning of next year. And so if you want more information about that, please reach out to me. You can just go to pcaddy.com, which is PCADI.com, and fill out the contact information and let me know. And then we can see about sending you some more information about the pilot program. And that means you would be an associate certified coach or professional certified coach through the International Coaching Federation if you go through our certification program. So if you've ever been thinking about becoming a coach, this is your sign to be able to do that. So just reach out to us at ppcadi.com.
Awesome. So wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Kiki, for being on the show. It was such a delight to be here with you. All of the pearls. Everyone should go back and re listen to this because, yes, you have talents and gifts and strengths out there. And you heard it from Dr. Kiki. So thank you so much. And we'll see you next time. And again, follow us, subscribe to like our show here on the YouTube channel. And if you're listening on Apple, please leave us a review. And if you're interested in telling us what you want to hear more of, email us at podcast@transforminghealthcarecoaching.com. And we'll be able to find speakers and topics that match exactly what you're looking for. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to the Transforming Healthcare Coaching podcast. If you found this episode interesting or useful, please share it with your friends and colleagues in healthcare. And we would love it if you hit subscribe so that you never miss an episode. We want to help with the topics and problems that you want us to talk about. Leave us a review wherever you listen to us with suggestions, feedback, and praise. It means so much to us, and we actually read every comment. For deeper support in your life and work as a healthcare professional and leader, head over to transforminghealthcarecoaching.com. Download our free 5 reflection questions to jumpstart your journey and join our email list to be the first to know about our coaching programs. We're also excited to offer the MedThrive community, a supportive space for group coaching and self-paced personal growth, providing an alternative path to growth beyond one-on-one coaching programs. Find out more and join this thriving community at transforminghealthcarecoaching.com. Together, we can transform healthcare one person at a time.